Hey, Alex here at mixinglessons.com. In this video, we're going to have a look at using pass filters. So pass filters are really useful because they operate slightly differently to some of the other filter types that you'll have in your EQ plugin. Whereas you might be used to turning parts of the frequency spectrum up or down when you use something like a parametric EQ or a shelving filter, rather than just turning something down, a pass filter essentially allows you to cut out or filter out a part of the frequency spectrum. So let's set this EQ plugin up so that we've got two pass filters. So here we have the two main pass filter types. We have a high pass filter and we have a low pass filter. Now you'll sometimes hear a high pass filter referred to as a low cut filter, and you'll sometimes hear a low pass filter referred to as a high cut filter, and that's because they do exactly what their names suggest. A low pass filter allows anything lower than a certain point to pass through, and simultaneously cuts anything that's higher than that point. In the case of a high pass filter, it allows anything that's higher than a certain frequency to pass through, and simultaneously it cuts anything that's lower than that frequency. So let's have a quick listen to how that sounds. So as you can hear there, when we turned on the high pass filter, it started to cut out the low end and it only allowed the frequencies on the higher side to pass through. And when we turned on the low pass filter, it started to cut out the high end and it only allowed the frequencies on the lower side to pass through. So with the high pass filter, we lost some of the kick drum in the low end. With the low pass filter, we lost the hi-hat and the top end of the snare in the high end. So pass filters are really useful when you don't just want to turn a part of the frequency spectrum down, but you actually want to try and filter it out. So a common example of this might be using a high pass filter to filter out the plosives, the P's and the B's, those little pops against the mic in a vocal track. You also might want to use one to filter out things like mains hum or the rumble of traffic outside, or maybe an accidental knock against a mic stand that might cause a little low end bump. You might also want to use one in a situation where you've got a lot of instruments in your mix that are contributing low end, so you've got acoustic guitars, electric guitars, pianos, alongside the bass guitar and the kick drum. In that situation, you might want to cut out some of the low end from the acoustic guitars and the electric guitars and the pianos so that they don't mask the kick drum and the bass guitar, and so that overall your mix doesn't become too muddy because it's got too much low end in it. And then for a low pass filter, you might want to use it to try and cut out some of the noise in the high end of a guitar amp, for example. So they're really useful filters when you don't just want to turn a part of the frequency spectrum down, you actually want to try and filter it out. Now there are two parameters to be aware of when you're controlling a pass filter, and they're exactly the same in both the case of the high pass filter and the low pass filter. The first is the frequency setting. So in the case of the high pass filter, this is going to set the point at which anything below this point is going to be filtered out and anything above this point is going to be allowed to pass. And in the case of the low pass filter, anything above this point is going to be cut out and anything below this point is going to be allowed to pass. And then you should have a parameter which lets you control the steepness of the filter's slope. So this is usually measured in decibels per octave, and the fewer the number of decibels that are cut per octave, the more gradual the slope will be, and the higher the number of decibels per octave that are cut, the steeper the slope will be. Now obviously different EQs vary. With some EQ plugins you'll be able to control both. With some plugins the slope might be fixed and you'll only have control over which frequency you set the pass filter at. In some cases both the slope and the frequency will be fixed and you'll maybe just have a button to toggle the pass filter on or off. Some plugins might have a high pass filter but no low pass filter, so the different EQ designs vary, but this is how pass filters work. I hope you found this video helpful. If you want to get a head start with EQing your music, head on over to mixinglessons.com/free-downloads and download your free copy of my EQ cheat sheet. It contains all the frequencies that you need to know for vocals, acoustic guitars, electric guitars, bass guitars, drums, and it also comes bundled with a free compression cheat sheet and a free vocal recording guide that I think you'll find really useful. Thank you very much for watching. Please remember to subscribe so that you can see my future videos, and I'll see you next time.